So hi, I'm Galia. I'm with Bancor. Raise your hand if you've heard of Bancor. Cool, a lot of people. Raise your hand if you understand what Bancor does. Less people. Raise your hand if you contributed to the token launch event. Cool. I like to start with this slide. Any useful statement about the future should at first seem ridiculous. Okay, just to contextualize, we're really at the beginning of a very fundamental shift in technology, in societal organization, and a lot of this sounds absurd, and it should, because it's really totally new. So I want to talk about a few things today. Blockchain, I'm going to kind of go through that really quickly, just in case anyone here doesn't feel grounded in some of those concepts. I know many of us are. Money in general, always useful to come back to what is money and what's changing in money. A little bit about Bancor, and then more excitingly, user-generated tokens, which is what we work on. So the internet is really good for sharing information. Information is one of the two protocols I like to think of that we use as humans. One of them being information transfer. This is text, ideas, images, video, and the other one, of course, is value, money and things, time and services. So the internet lets us share information. What's unique about information is that it can exist in many places at once. If I give it to you, an image, a file, we both now have it. That's not the same for value. What's unique about value is that when I send it to you, I no longer have it. Now only you have it. It's very important that only one of us has it. And this is why the internet hasn't been good for value transfer, because we've really needed to rely on third parties, mainly banks and governments, to maintain these ledgers and authenticate or ensure that truly when I send value from me to you, only you now have it, I no longer have it. You don't want to copy, you don't want to duplicate, you want the original. So this is essentially the novelty and the innovation that blockchain brings us, as we learned through the Bitcoin white paper. This is a technology that allows us to share value in a totally dependable way without a third party, without that bank or that government maintaining the ledger for us. So if you think conceptually what a fundamental shift this is for how we share value, it's as fundamental as having the internet for how we share information. So blockchain 1.0, of course, came to us through what we know of as Bitcoin. And if we look at blockchain 2.0, essentially we see kind of the rise of tokens. One of the main ones that we hear about and talk about, of course, is Ethereum, but there are hundreds, actually now thousands of tokens. And what's especially significant about blockchain 2.0 is really the rise of smart contracts and smart contract-enabled blockchains. And if you think about Bitcoin as kind of a 2D money, you can think of Ethereum as 3D money. You can now take this money, you can program it, you can customize it, you can work with it. So I like to think of Bitcoin as a calculator, really good, really solid, really dependable, and Ethereum as an Excel spreadsheet, right? You can formulate the cells, you can add some color, you can work with it a bit more as you wish. I always love to show this this graph of the Ethereum token. Just a reminder, it stayed kind of steady and very low for a couple years, really, until recently when it gained enough momentum and usage to hit some of the prices that we're seeing today. I love sharing this slide because today we find ourselves in a token economy where tokens are expected to pop immediately. People want to see that price spike. They want to see it spike now. And this is a good reminder that to build anything fundamental, to build something that might become an ecosystem where millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people might collaborate around this fundamental infrastructure, actually does and should take time. So I wouldn't say that we have yet reached user-generated tokens, and here's why. This is what it looks like to create a token today. Of course, it's a code-intensive process. You need developers. In fact, you need Solidity developers, which are an even more rare, unique breed of developers today, though that will change. Certainly, the average person you bump into on the street is not creating a token, but certainly many teams and companies are able to do so today. And if we kind of map the development in terms of access, who can do what, to what we saw with the internet, where things really got interesting was where we reduced technical barriers to entry to such a place that anyone could participate. This is what we think of in the internet as user-generated content, right? You see this in YouTube, you see this in Facebook groups, you see this in Reddit. You don't need to be a professional videographer to have a very successful video on YouTube. You don't need to be a professional journalist to have a very successful subreddit on Reddit. And you don't need to be a professional event organizer to have groups that are successful on Facebook. Literally anyone, nearly anyone can do it. And that's when we start seeing the exponential growth and participation in our internet platforms. So if we switch gears a bit now from the blockchain technology to money itself, I like to think of money having gone through sort of two fundamental eras, and right now we're entering its third fundamental era. So a little bit of a definition that I think of when I think of money. Money is a tool. Money is a tool for collaboration. It's not preordained. God or goddess didn't give it to us. It is literally a technology that humans invented to separate buying and selling over time and space, right? Before we had money, we had barter. I show up with my carrots, you've got your tomatoes. Assuming I want your tomatoes, you want my carrots, great, we have a trade. Over time, we organize marketplaces to try and lower what's called the double coincidence of wants problem in economics, right? That's not very common that my tomatoes and your carrots are the exact fit. And so that's what's called the double coincidence of wants. And when you organize more people around a marketplace, there's more chances you'll find what you need and that someone wants what you have. Money, of course, allowed us to separate that buying and selling, a fundamental technology for humankind. In the first era of money, money came from the earth. Money was gold, money was salt, money was oil, money were sticks and seashells, things that were around us that we could say, these are valuable, also these are scarce, also these are hard to get. If you got gold, you mined it. That was hard. You put in time and effort. Of course, we saw kings and queens trying to amass as much of these resources as possible to control trade amongst the people. And of course, there's a lot of power that comes with that. So in the first era of money, money came from the earth. In the second era of money, money came from governments. So whereas we had kings and queens, very small groups of people controlling the resources, we moved into the nation-state era where we still have small groups of people, more than kings and queens, still relatively small, and they're controlling this resource that we call money. They're printing it, they're issuing it, they're most importantly deciding where it goes, how much of it there is, and who gets it at first, and sort of what is that process by which it trickles down and reaches all the people who, of course, need the money to play the game of life. So this is an awkward picture of me at a place called Bretton Woods in New Hampshire. Bretton Woods is significant for hosting a monetary conference at the end of World War II. I bring this up here because this is kind of our most recent era, our most recent phase of this second era of money where money is issued by governments. At the end of World War II, kind of the world powers got together at Bretton Woods to establish the new financial order. There were a couple competing proposals. The big question was, what will be the global reserve currency? What will be the one that everything is denominated in? What will be the one that we'll use for international trade? There were two competing proposals. One made by America, which was to use the US dollar. Of course, America was coming off very strong from the war. Its economy hadn't been as affected. It was, of course, affected, but not as much as the European economies where the war took place in their home turf. The US dollar was backed by gold. So it was considered a very trustworthy candidate to be our global reserve. And there was a competing proposal. So this picture is not so easy to see, but this is an economist by the name of Keynes, which you've probably heard of, from the UK. And his proposal was called Bancor. In fact, our work today is inspired by this proposal. And he said, listen, if we use a national currency as our global reserve currency, that might cause some problems. This country whose currency it is going to be disproportionately powerful. They're going to have disproportionate sway in the world. Everyone will want their currency. Their currency will be the most liquid of them all. He envisioned a scenario where we decouple this global reserve from a specific nation. Of course, you've got to govern it. But this was the Bancor proposal in a nutshell. We all kind of know how this has worked out. The US said thanks, but no thanks. We're going to go with the USD, and there were good reasons they thought for doing that. And I love this picture. It's hard to see the text, but this is a group of 9 men. And these 9 men made the call, and we got the financial system that we have today. The IMF, the special drawing rights, essentially how the modern monetary system works. Fast forward to this group of men and women. This is my team, very inspired by the Bancor proposal and very inspired by the works of a man named Bernard Lietaer, who I'll talk about in a moment. We saw Bitcoin essentially as the first user-generated currency. So like I mentioned, we're a Silicon Valley originally based team. We've been watching consumer internet develop literally since the 90s, since middle school. I always say I went to middle school with the internet. And when we saw Bitcoin, we thought, governments have been making money all this time. Now someone, people, person, woman, who knows, made a non-governmental currency. There might be more. There might be many. And we started thinking about the internet tools and the mobile applications that would serve us in this world with multiple currencies. So we started piloting, actually in Tel Aviv, where we were based at the time, this concept of community currencies, right? So if we go back to this notion of what is money, money is a tool to collaborate. And we see this in crisis after crisis, right? When money gets sucked out of an economy like in Greece, all the people are still there. All the factories are still there. All the potential is still there. But the money is gone. And so no one can collaborate. You can think of money like the blood in a system, right? It's taking oxygen from organ to organ. You got all your organs there, but without the blood, nothing's really going to work. And so we started piloting these concepts of community currencies. What happens when you essentially airdrop monopoly money into a community or a group of people? And what we discovered was astounding. So what happens is they use it. They use it to buy and sell things amongst themselves. They use it to collaborate. And this specific currency called Hearts, Lev Market, was a currency for mothers in Israel. There were about 20,000 mothers in this community. We made all the mobile apps and the marketplace and the things that they needed to transact. And we literally saw tens of millions of dollars of commerce, worth of commerce, in Hearts exclusively, as embodied by goods and services moving between hands, between the mothers in this community. So you can imagine a lot of the commerce here was based around family life, a lot of toys moving from home to home, a lot of clothes, a lot of services, a lot of consulting, birthday cakes for birthday parties, real collaboration among these mothers. And people asked us all the time, and we asked the mothers ourselves, why weren't you doing this before? And they all said, we had no money. We had no free money. All of our money was going to rent and to gas and to school, and we had no money left at the end of the day. I didn't buy a birthday cake. I just didn't. Now that I have this budget in Hearts, I bought a birthday cake from my neighbor. She was there before, and her cake stuff was there before, but I had no money to give her. And so literally the commerce that was created within this community was life-changing for these mothers and for these families, which many of whom were very cash constrained. We did these pilots, great, what could go wrong? Let's drop monopoly money on all these communities, wonderful. What we realized over time is that there's a reason that community currencies haven't taken off until now. There's a reason why not every neighborhood is just printing their own money. And I'm not talking about regulatory reasons or legal reasons. I'm talking about practical usage-based reasons. And the reason is very simple, liquidity. So a currency which is restricted to a certain area or which is limited in its scope is very hard to trade outside of that community. And as you all know, we're in a global world, right? At least a mobile world where people are not spending 100% of their time within one specific community. A brand new community, if you can think of it like a brand new nation, is not able to provide a full stack economy worth of goods and services, right? You still need to get a car, you still need to pay your rent to someone who might not accept Hearts for payment. And so if your Hearts aren't liquid to any other currency, they're very limited in their nature, even though they're very powerful. So liquidity, this is the fundamental issue. So at Bancor, this is the problem that we decided that we're gonna approach. How do you make all of these new cryptocurrencies, all of these new community currencies, how do you make them liquid? How do you make them liquid to each other? And most importantly, how do you make them liquid to the old world or to the traditional currencies that we all use and are a part of so that they're viable and functional from day one? And at Bancor, we are spearheading this initiative called Smart Token. So in a nutshell, a smart token is a new generation of cryptocurrency. It is a token that holds in reserve small amounts of other tokens, okay? And the price is set algorithmically as a ratio between the money supply of the new token and the reserve balance of the old or other token. Essentially, you can think of this like an interlinking connection mechanism. You can think of it like a language where these tokens speak to each other based on this mathematical formula to reflect an automatic price, and most importantly, to allow them to be instantaneously liquid to the currency that they hold in reserve. So the Bancor Network token, as an example, holds Ether in reserve, and the Bancor Network token is always liquid to Ether. You can always buy it with Ether, and you can always sell it for Ether, always, outside of an exchange. And this is a very timely topic given everything that we're seeing around exchanges, both security-wise and also regulation-wise. These tokens are smart. They have a central bank in their smart contracts, in their code. They issue you tokens when you buy them, and they destroy the tokens when they sell them, when you sell them. This is actually the formula. It's a very simple fraction, but again, you can learn more about it on the website. So the end goal for Bancor is to create, like I said, reduce that technical barrier to entry, allowing anyone to easily create a token for their community, for their project, for their small business, for their loyalty points. And allow those currencies to be liquid and viable from day one so that we don't see a repeat of what we have in today's financial system. Today, if you make a new token, the business connections that you need to be listed on an exchange are massive. The volume that you need for anyone to care about your token so that it's liquid and tradable is massive. This obviously doesn't work well for a small neighborhood or a group of mothers or anything else that you can imagine being very powerful for people and very kind of non-business-like. So of course, as an end-user product, we're going to employ all of the end-user innovations that make things easy for people to digest. This is just an example of a chatbot that's going to help you essentially create your token. It will help you launch your token. It will help you launch a crowd sale for your token. There are, of course, many different options for how you can do this. And the idea here is creating a token, a store of value for your network, for your community, for your project will be as easy as having a conversation. So this is a guy that's really special to us, Bernard Liotard. Bernard was one of the co-architects of the euro. In fact, he resigned from the euro project when they changed the plan from what he originally architected to what we see today as a highly problematic currency. The original plan was the euro is kind of a meta-European currency, and every nation needs to keep their own currency. Bernard believes in this multi-currency system as being more stable, more diverse, and more appropriate for different economies. In the end, the European bloc, of course, global parameters wanted to compete with the US dollar and other things, decided, no, we're just going to do the global European currency. Of course, it's presenting problems for them today because the different nations are very, very different fundamentally. Bernard speaks a lot about community currencies. I highly recommend that you check out his work, tons of videos online, fascinating stuff about what makes an ecosystem stable as opposed to efficient, resilient as opposed to efficient, which is actually much more of what we want in our systems if we think about the humans using them and not the humans building them or directing them from the top. And this really is my final slide, and I think it's the most interesting one. So we've all heard of Metcalfe's law, right? Metcalfe brought us internet theory that said rather than just broadcasting to people, when you actually connect people in peer-to-peer networks, marketplaces, whatever it is, you have an exponential growth in your network connectivity between the nodes. And another law that most people haven't heard of is called Reed's law. And it actually says beyond connecting people peer-to-peer, when you give people the tools to form their own groups, that's when you get not only the exponent, but an exponential exponent. And so if we map this to what we're seeing in currency, not only the hits, not only the Bitcoin and the Ether and the other things that we'll certainly see in the coming years, but when we allow people to create their own currencies and give them the tools to form their own networks in their own visions, that's when we're really going to see the exponential growth in value. Thanks.